Hello and welcome to Cardiff Central Podcast. A little bit later than originally planned this week. Fortunately, there were some internet gremlins, but I'm delighted to say that we are joined by Carwyn, as always, and also our special guest, David Allen from the Cardiff Rugby Board. How are you doing both?
I'm good. How are you, David?
Yeah, I'm great, thank you, and thanks very much for inviting me on.
We'll get in. So David is the supporter advisor to the Cardiff Rugby Board. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of that bit first. But first of all, we'd just like a little introduction to yourself and how you've got involved in rugby. And just sort of your journey so far through it.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, it goes back quite a long way. I think the first game watching Cardiff was in season 70-71. So obviously, like, it was a hugely exciting time in Welsh rugby, and the Lions were just about to go off on tour to New Zealand, and so I was watching live rugby in this brand new ground. That was the year that our current ground kind of opened. So I just loved it, really fell in love with the place. I think I got a junior season ticket the next year and became a member while I was still in school, and kind of, in those days, it was a bit more formal than it is now. If you wanted to become a member of the club, you had to be proposed and seconded. So I was proposed by a guy called Gary Davis, who was the Cardiff hooker and who was a friend of the family, and seconded by Alan Priday, a former kind of fullback who's now president of Cardiff Athletic Club, and basically I've had an unbroken period ever since. I've been a member kind of over the last 50 years. So it's been a long involvement, and one that's brought a lot of pleasure and a considerable amount of pain.
Hasn't it all to all of us, I think, that.
It's part of the journey. It's part of the journey, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, you sort of mentioned pain. So, just sort of jump ahead with the questions, slightly different order than we tried last night. But how do you think the club season's gone this far, both for Cardiff Rugby and the Rags?
Well, I think, so speaking from a board perspective, obviously we knew it was going to be incredibly tough, and I guess so it's played out, in terms of results. As you're aware, I think we've been incredibly unlucky in a number of games. But I suppose, if you'd have asked us in August or September, how do you think it had played out, we'd have been quite happy with where we are, not because of the results, but because of I think the spirit that's been shown, the culture that's beginning to develop at the club, and the huge effort that's been kind of put in. So it's perverse, isn't it, really? We've won 3 games or whatever, we're all feeling quite good about it. So I think that kind of sums up what I feel about it. But yeah, we had huge trepidation about it, but we're actually probably quite pleased the way it's worked out. I think we're under no illusions that that can't carry on forever. We can't get by on spirit and kind of good feelings. So we know that we have to sort of shape up further in that regard. But yeah, I think given the position we started in, we take where we are, really. I think for the Rags, it's been an inconsistent season, hasn't it? But they're still up there, and again, that's not a bad place to be when you consider the disruptions they've had, the squad problems they've had as well. So it's not great, but it feels like the direction of travel is good, and you just have to keep that going now.
Yeah, it's that weird situation, as you mentioned, about the positivity, isn't it? And I suppose it's fair to say a few things needed to change in the off season. You mentioned culture there. It's the positivity around the club seems to be well, everywhere. What's it like at board level? Is it echoed that what's going on the pitch, the positivity around the side, the positivity around Matt Shearer, is that being echoed at board level as well, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been an incredibly difficult time for the board. As you know, you won't be surprised to hear that, but we've had a really, really difficult kind of 2 years. You know, we've had all the COVID stuff and all the consequences of that. You know, trying to agree a new deal with the union, then losing Peter, you know, was a massive kind of blow. So it's been a whole sequence of unfortunate events, really. So from a board point of view, I think it's a cliche, but you know, the focus really has been on survival for a long, long time, and trying to make sure that we're still here and still fighting, which we are. So I think just recently the mood's probably lightened slightly, and that is down to what's happening on the pitch, and it's down, I think, to Matt in particular. I think he's been absolutely brilliant. You know, you hear him speak on the interviews that he does post match and so on, and I think they're always very eloquent. They're always very realistic and avoid a lot of bull, I think, to put it bluntly. You know, he's very, very honest guy. And that's the way he is. You know, he comes and addresses the board at every meeting, and what you see in those interviews is what we see in the board. So I think we've gone from a position whereby, you know, the only strategy we've had is to still be here, and now we're beginning, hopefully, to sail into calmer waters, and we can begin to think more proactively about where we want to be and what it's going to take to get us to where we want to be.
Yeah, on Matt, you know, a lot of people say that they're straight talking and use that as a reason to be rude, but he manages to be straight talking and polite, which is and honest and polite which is different. You sort of touched on something there, which was going to be a question I was going to ask, which is how often do the players and coaches get an opportunity to talk at the board meetings and speak to the board about things that they'd like to get implemented?
Well, that's an issue actually that we flagged recently. We have a number of subgroups to the board, so one of which is, not surprisingly, kind of rugby, and that rugby subgroup has obviously a huge amount of contact with the board and the coaches and so on. But the board as an entity doesn't, and actually it's something that we discussed last time out, and I think it's not a, you know, that's not right. It's not, you know, it doesn't help develop the kind of culture that we want. So we're having a kind of timeout in May, and we're looking at what our future strategy needs to be. And one of the items on that agenda will be about how the board and the squad actually has an ongoing kind of open communication. Because I think at the moment, the squad tend to see members of the board when things go wrong, and that's not great. You know, so we need to turn that around a little bit, and that's something that we'll be looking to do from this year on.
Could that be with a sort of player representative on the board, or I don't? Obviously, if this plans are ongoing, do you know exactly what that would look like going forward?
No, we haven't got preconceptions about that, but obviously one of the things that we have at the moment is Sam's now on the board, so Sam Warburton's on the board. Again, you know, absolute breath of fresh air, and you know, Sam's another link through to the playing side. So, you know, that has already improved, I think, communication there. But no, I don't think we have any fixed ideas of what that should look like. And I hope we don't think that's a decision for the board. It's a decision for the board and the playing group. So, you know, we need to sort of toss that around and sort of see what works best. But yeah, so having Sam there has already kind of changed that situation. But you know, we need to work out the most effective and efficient way of opening that up a bit.
As we sort of started, we've sort of gradually moved off field into the board now. Just wondered if you could explain to the listeners a little bit about your role as a supporter advisor, you know, what exactly that entails, and also sort of how you ended up, because I believe it's quite a funny typical story of how anyone gets involved in anything, to be honest.
Yeah, well, start off with that, perhaps. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is just one huge accident that I'm kind of doing what I'm doing at the moment. So, going back to 2015, a gentleman called Neil McSorley called a meeting to look at establishing a new supporters trust for Cardiff Rugby. There had been a trust previously called Call to Arms, which essentially been like a single issue trust. It was concerned about trying to prevent the move essentially to the Cardiff City Stadium, and obviously then when that happened, it lost a lot of steam. So 2015, the thought went into setting up a new trust, and I kind of went along to that meeting not knowing anything at all about supporters trusts and what they were kind of meant to do. But yeah, I found it a useful meeting, but made the mistake of kind of leaving early. Then went to the second meeting to find that I'd been elected chair of this group. So, cut a long story short, I ended up chairing a working party over the next year or so, which looked at how we might set up a new trust. Then ended up being chair of what became CF10 from 2016 through to 2021. When I stood down after 5 years being chair, and Lynn Glaister took over. So I was just kind of enjoying my supporter retirement when the board announced that it was setting up this post of supporter advisor. So CF10 had been campaigning for a good few years to try and get a supporter director on the board. So that, you know, that's a lot of progressive clubs have that kind of facility, and the Scarlets have had that kind of role in post for a number of years. So that was in 2022, and CF10 asked me if I would apply, kind of if I would be their applicant, and I agreed to do that and was appointed. So this is my third year in the role. It's a 3-year tenure, and basically the role is to provide that link between supporters and the board. It's to undertake a number of specific things, for example, in relation to taking on responsibility for things like heritage. So what I've tried to do in that 3 years is not be seen as the rep for CF10. So I've tried to engage as much as possible with the other support bodies at Cardiff Arms Park. And yeah, so I guess in a nutshell, the job is to bring a supporter perspective to decisions that the board makes. So there isn't like a slot in board meetings, you know, where I speak and feedback supporter stuff. It's kind of a theme that runs throughout everything, you know. So it's up to, you know, myself to make sure that I say my two pennyworth, you know, as different issues come up throughout the meeting tree. So, you know, the objective is to try and, I guess, improve the quality of decision making by having a supporter in those discussions.
You just briefly, this wasn't on the question sheet, but as you sort of brought up, you're coming to the end of a 3-year sort of term. Are you considering staying on for another one, or are you happy to pass the buck, ready to pass the buck on, depending as it may be?
To be honest, I think it's not actually clear in the job spec whether you can do a second term even if you want to. I think it's not up to me. It's up to the supporter groups, really. I take the lead from them. I think they're quite keen that I do stand for a second term, because they think having some consistency is good. It takes a while, as you'll appreciate, with any organisation, to sort of get to know how it operates and so on. So 3 years isn't a long time. So the short answer is I'm pondering it at the moment. But I've also suggested to the supporter groups that maybe the post be limited to 2 terms. So I think, you need throughput there. So it's like a balance between having that consistency, getting your feet under the table, getting to know how it works a little bit, but not someone sort of seeing it as a job for life. I think it needs churn. So at the moment, the supporter groups are putting their thoughts together on maybe how the process of appointment could be improved. And again, the idea is we're going to feed that back to the board meeting in May. So yeah, so I've got a few months yet, but I'll make my mind up over the next I guess 3 or 4 months. But fundamentally, I'll be led by the supporter groups as to what they want.
So moving on to the sort of what is probably the biggest bit of news to come out of Cardiff so far this year, with the takeover of the new owners. Just wondering what your sort of opinions of Phil and Neil are. A little bit about that, about them, or your perspective of them, for those who aren't really aware.
Yeah, it's kind of it's been a very interesting time with the acquisition, obviously, and when Peter sadly passed away, one of the last things he did was make provision for us to continue to have continued financial support. So as you'll be aware, and under the agreement with the Welsh Rugby Union, you have to have this thing called an RPI, a regional principal investor, and the regional principal investor essentially underwrites the business and kind of undertakes a lot of the financial risk in the business. So Peter's family, being fantastic and supportive, but they realised that they couldn't carry that on long term. So we have to find basically somebody to fulfil that role, because it's part of the obligation that we have with the union. So we did have a number of people that were interested in getting involved, and I think Phil and Neil were by far the best fit. So Phil is reasonably well known to people at the club. He was a good friend of Peter's, has been coming to watch the club for a long time, and I knew him without knowing that I knew him, if you see what I mean. So it was this guy that was kind of always, coming along to matches and sort of being with the directors and so on. So yeah, I wouldn't claim to know them that well. Obviously, there's been a huge amount of work that's gone on with Richard Holland and them, and with Alan and so on, to kind of get the deal over the line. We've only had one board meeting with them present. So I guess the board is kind of getting to know them. But what's kind of clear is their passion. So it's kind of, you'll have seen some sort of photos from various games where they've been sort of giving it welly when we scored a try and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's quite interesting sitting near Phil during matches. I thought I got kind of carried away and over involved, but he certainly does, and I take that to be a great sign. This is somebody who's actually kind of committed to the club. So we're still getting to know each other, I suppose, is the situation. But we're confident that they're a good fit for Cardiff. I think it's out there in the public domain that their strategy is going to be very much to under-promise and over-deliver, which I think I'm very pleased about. You know, we don't want people sort of saying we're going to do this, that, and the other, and then it never happens. Their priority is to stabilize the business. You know, financially, it's been incredibly precarious for all the reasons that you guys know about. But their ambition is from maybe 2 seasons' time to start, getting us back where we should be. Already, there's been a difference, because we've been had to operate pretty much cut to the bone in a number of different ways for a year or more, and they're coming on board as kind of ease that situation. So yeah, it feels different, but it is very, very early days. I mentioned earlier on that we're going to be thinking about strategy in May, and that'll be the first time really we've had the chance to sit down and map out what it is that we want to do. So I'll probably answer the question much more effectively in a couple of months' time. But yeah, it feels good. It feels right.
Just wanted to ask, I don't know if you can say, but if you can you say how many offers were on the table alongside? No, fair enough. Thanks for that. Then just following on from that strategy, then, is that obviously a lot of Cardiff's recruitment's been done quite early and players, but will that come into the strategy meeting that's coming up, you mentioned? Or is recruitment a separate meeting that doesn't involve as much board interaction?
No, to be honest, the board doesn't really get involved in that, and I think that's entirely appropriate. That's kind of operational side of the business, really, and obviously when people are having sensitive negotiations about coming on board or perhaps leaving the club, that's not something a board should get involved in. That wouldn't be appropriate. So our role perhaps is more to look at the spending, question the spending, and so on. But it's kind of higher level really than that kind of nitty gritty. So obviously we know what's kind of going on, but we don't get involved at that kind of level, and that's quite appropriate that we shouldn't. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's gone on quite quickly. And not all of that's in the public domain at the moment, and obviously it's not going to be put in the public domain by me this evening. But yeah, there'll be further stuff coming along, I guess.
It's great to hear.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I suppose it sort of comes in the strategy, so maybe you don't have this information yet. But have Phil and Neil any? They sort of, in their original press statement, they sort of said vaguely what their priorities are for the development and for the rags. Have they elaborated any more on that? Is it for them? Is it getting the facilities in place? Is it about making sure the support staff are there, or is there something that still needs to be thrashed out?
Yeah, it's all those things. So there's no one lever, I think, to pull, to make a successful club, really. So yeah, we've been like operating on a very thinned down infrastructure. People have ended up kind of quite often doing multiple jobs, and ending up doing jobs perhaps that they're not as familiar with. So yeah, I think we've done remarkably well given that's been the position, but we're going to be in a much more positive position, I think, kind of moving forward. So it's everything. I think the philosophy is very much trying to grow from within, as for all sorts of reasons, really. But that is very much the kind of culture that we want to develop, and I think we're seeing the dividends of reaping the dividends of that already. But also on the playing side, trying to bring people back, and again, you're seeing that happening in kind of practice. But you know, for us to be where we want to be, it's not just about, you know, being good on the pitch. It's about having a good infrastructure, you know, to support what happens on the pitch. It's about developing facilities that make people want to come and play at Cardiff. So, you know, you can't, I think, you know, tick any one of those boxes. You have to sort of be looking to tick them all. How quickly we can make progress on them is, you know, remains to be seen. But I think there is a very clear view that, you know, we need to do all of these things well. So, you know, the strategy is about working out what the steps are along that road, really.
Sorry, got to unmute myself. That's false answer to Zoom. I was just wondering, in general, about your tenure and perhaps when you started, were there any themes that kept up coming up from supporters and things that they wanted to see implemented? And in your opinion, where are Cardiff in terms of implementing those changes by now?
I think one of the biggest themes is always communication. And I think we're really good at the softer stuff, if I can put it that way. So we're really good on the player stuff, and you know, Mike Brown, I think, does a sort of brilliant job on all that. I think we're less good at communicating what we're trying to do strategically, and I think that's still true. So one of the first things I did was to get agreement that we'd produce a very high-level summary of what happened at every board meeting. So we do that after every board meeting. That's a little kind of, you know, 1 page or so of A4 that kind of just tells people what goes on, not the details. Obviously, we can't kind of share that. But yeah, but we keep mapping out what we're going to do in terms of communication of these some bigger level things, and it, for lots of good reasons, it never seems to happen. So yeah, part of my job is to go, hey, you know, remember we said we were going to do this and we're going to do that, and we're not kind of quite doing it. So yeah, and I think one of the problems the club feels is that it feels like it has to, if it's going to communicate with supporters, it feels like it has to have some big news to communicate. And I keep sort of saying it's not like that. You know, it's people just want regular communications. They just want to know kind of what's happening. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering, but actually just, you know, making the effort to do regular newsletters and so on is something that people kind of really, really appreciate. So yeah, I think communications are kind of is a big theme that we keep kind of coming back to, and sometimes we do it well, but as I say, not, I think, in terms of the bigger strategy stuff. I don't think we're great at looking after supporters, if I'm honest. We don't do enough for supporters. We don't sort of do enough kind of events-wise for supporters. There's a huge focus, quite reasonably, on sponsors and things like that. You know, a lot of work goes into trying to keep them engaged. But I think people, we take supporters a little bit for granted. And again, that's a theme that I sort of flag it quite often. But you know, having said that, the fact that I'm in the position that I am is real progress. When CF10 first sort of started off advocating for a supporter director, I got invited to go to a board meeting to actually kind of make the case for a supporter director. And basically, I got sort of bitten off and spat out by Peter Thomas within about 5 minutes, and it all ended very, very badly. But a couple of years, you know, down the road, we have a supporter on the board. So, you know, you're not going to achieve everything you want to achieve instantly, but the fact that we have that in place is like really, really important. So I'm trying hard at the moment to, I've mentioned this already, but to try to engage with all the supported groups. And some of that's been successful, some of it kind of less. So it's work in progress, really, I think. And I'm wandering way off your original question, but yeah.
No, it's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm glad you mentioned the communication, because I know it's a topic that comes up quite frequently in the CF10 meetings, which I've attended, and yeah, particularly with the the supposedly monthly chairman's letter, which isn't always frequently. I mean, I said, because it was one thing I remember myself being quite frustrated with at the end of last season, when all the issues with Dye and all the players, and it would have just been nice to, I said it would just be nice for from the club to just say, look, we can't say anything now, but it is in hand, and just you do sometimes feel a little bit forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. But we are working on it. And in actual fact, we agreed a communication strategy last July, and in January, I pointed out that we really needed to review that, because we were going to miss a lot of the targets if we left it to kind of season end. So hopefully that's in the process of being reviewed. But yeah, it is kind of something to keep chipping away at. So I am trying to keep chipping away at it. But I think certainly from my point of view as a board advisor, I know it's a major issue.
I just thought I'm going to pop in one of our listeners' questions in. So this is from Carwyn Williams on Facebook. He's wondering, are we likely to get physical programs again? I don't know if that's necessarily anything that gets discussed at board level, but he's pointing out that a lot of other clubs and the WRU are now back to physical programs. I think some people just like having some nice memento to hold on. Not my personal thing, but I appreciate people love it.
Yeah, and the answer for Carwyn is no, unfortunately. I think it's just the number we sold just didn't make it kind of worthwhile. And obviously, somebody who's got an interest in heritage like myself, yeah, I really regret the passing of the paper program. But I think we discussed it actually quite a few times, because there's been this is a regular question from collectors, but it just makes no sense financially, unfortunately, to do that.
Wow, that's a shame, but yeah, sort of I get the thing, particularly with the whole pressure to be a bit more green and use less paper, and everyone's gone to e-tickets and such.
Yeah, and I think to be honest, I think not enough people look at it, but I do think the the online program is actually pretty good. So in terms of information, it's pretty good. But yeah, people want that bit of paper in their hand, don't they?
Yeah, so I remember uni having all like my gig tickets and rugby, Cardiff rugby tickets, sort of just all on my pin board.
Yeah, I've got a load of Springsteen tickets and a load of Wagner opera tickets just over here. So I'm very much into paper.
Did you want to ask something there, Carwyn?
No, I to be honest, I don't tend to put them anywhere. Just I've got them stacked in my wallet. So I've got like tickets after tickets after tickets just stacked in my wallet. It's just eventually I have to clear them out and then put them to the side, and then it starts again. That's the process I go through.
Yeah, I see. Because we sort of brushed on heritage. So one of the more confusing topics, I know we did try and discuss it last night, but unfortunately we couldn't put that out. But so obviously Cardiff Athletic Club hold a huge part with the club, and holding heritage shares, which I think certainly myself and a lot of the listeners didn't quite understand what these heritage shares are.
Okay, yeah. So these go back to when the limited company was formed at the end of the 90s, 1997. So as rugby became a professional sport, obviously there needed to be a step up in terms of how the club was managed. So at that point in time, from the 1920s, basically the rugby team was part of Cardiff Athletic Club. So when Cardiff Rugby Football Limited was set up in 1997, all the assets associated with the rugby club transferred into the new company, and those were valued at £750,000 at that time. So in recognition of the receipt of those assets, a large number of shares were given to Cardiff Athletic Club in recognition of that move. So 750,000 heritage shares were given to Cardiff Athletic Club at that time. And Cardiff Athletic Club had another 500,000 ordinary shares as well. But those heritage shares were associated with certain articles, certain clauses in the company articles. So basically, at that time, it said something like the team couldn't play outside of the boundaries of the city of Cardiff, and the colours of the team, Cambridge Blue and Black, could not be changed without the authority of the holders of the heritage shares. Okay, so more recently, those heritage clauses have been strengthened. So when we had the general meeting a couple of weeks back, whenever it was, and the new articles for Cardiff Rugby were approved, those heritage clauses now have been expanded. So they still include the club colours, but they say something like, I'm just looking for them, they're somewhere on my desk. They say the team can't leave the Arms Park on a long-term basis unless basically the rent that they're being asked to pay is ridiculous compared to what is kind of market value, and that the names Cardiff Rugby and Cardiff RSC can't be changed without the permission of the holders of the heritage shares. So basically, if somebody sort of wanted to change the name of the team to, the Severn Valley Pirates or something like that, they couldn't do it without the permission of Cardiff Athletic Club. So that's basically what that means. Not sure if it's clear, but that is essentially what the heritage shares are about.
I think I followed. Does that also give them voting rights then as well, or is that on matters, or how does that work?
Yeah, they're still a shareholder under the new arrangements, but they haven't got their ordinary shares anymore. I think those were part of the deal with Phil O'Neill taking over.
Yeah, that answers. So they are voting shares as well. It's not just I can't remember the term, but yeah.
Yes, I'm pretty sure they are, but I'd have to double check on that actually, to be honest. But the influence comes through, those kind of clauses really. And what's kind of interesting is that it was the CAC AGM a couple of weeks ago, and a few of us asked questions about, well, if that ever came to pass, if there was a proposal to change the colours or change the name or all the rest of it, could we be assured that would be put to a vote of the members? And I think we got an answer, yes. But we kind of probably need to get a more robust guarantee that would be the case. It's unlikely, but I think we'd be happier if we felt that such an issue would be put to the membership rather than decided by the management committee of the CAC.
Yeah, you just have to look at the situation that happened a few years ago at Cardiff City, don't you, to see the importance of those sort of things.
Yeah.
All right, so what should we do for next? So it's because we jumped a bit around in the order, trying to find a question we haven't asked yet.
That's certainly not my fault. It's all down to you guys there.
Yeah, I'm taking full responsibility for that one for a change.
It's normally me going massively off script, to be fair.
Yeah. So one of the other big sort of stories is the whole was it the EDC? So the sort of the elite development competition. So there was initially it was thought that Cardiff, Merthyr and Pontypridd had been involved. Then they all weren't. Now it looks like Cardiff are going to be. I think was that something that's affected the board decision too much? Or that be more sort of internally in the RFC?
It's interesting. The quite often things happen outside the board, and then you get to hear about them. And I think that's not necessarily unusual. A lot of organisations are like that. So, yeah, the decision not to take part wasn't something that we were involved in. It was reported to the board, but we weren't kind of party to that decision. And I think it was essentially the turnaround was led by the RSC and its committee. They sort of thought the situation through again, and just basically decided that they did wish to express an interest after all, and we supported them in doing so. But it would be incorrect to sort of say that we were involved in that decision making process.
Okay, if it's were there ever opportunities to suggest an opinion from or give an opinion from the perspective of the region to the individual clubs, or was that not an opportunity after the initial decision was made?
Not quite sure I understand, Carwyn.
Sorry, I mean, because obviously the decisions by the individual clubs, sort of the Rags, Pontypridd, Merthyr, it will have an effect on possibly the development of players.
Mm-hmm.
Was that not? Were there discussions then post the initial decision that each club made, as you said, to see if they wanted to rechange their mind, and possibly what the region's stance on that was?
There was certainly a lot of discussion initially with the other clubs, and obviously you saw there was a kind of a joint statement kind of came out to that effect, really. I'm not I'm not sure what discussions went on subsequently, so I would be speculating, so I can't really answer that.
No, fair enough. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's as in looking from the outside, I just I can understand both points of view, but from the region's perspective, it's a bit of a worrying one. But in terms of the competition for the future, the EDC, what do you make of it? Because I think it's fair to say there was needed to be change, but whether or not that change is the right change is probably the key point in this.
Yeah, I think my concern about it, to be honest, was an obvious one, in that we're clearly in a mess, aren't we, developmentally, and I'm not sure at the moment how much sense it made to tweak a bit of the system. You would yes, we need to make, we need to have a more competitive competition. We need to have, reduce the gap between pro rugby and the current Premiership. All that, is kind of a given. But to me, it's kind of like changing one bit of a much kind of broader system, when actually what you need to be looking at is the broader system and where it all kind of fits together. So for me, it was sort of slightly odd to be thinking about it in isolation, and because I think the problem is we don't have a broader strategy for Welsh rugby. And that's the issue for me. So it's a bit of a distraction in some ways, because I think it's not the big question. There are bigger questions. So from a just being from a Cardiff point of view, and obviously where we have got this focus on interim development, and being clear about kind of where the RSC fits into that. They're really important things. So we need to tie all those strands together, the pathway, the RSC, etc., etc. But for me, it's kind of it's taking one bit, when maybe it's slightly precipitant to do that. So the union are obviously conducting their own producing their own strategy this year, long overdue. That will allow us to form our own strategy, because it's very difficult. We're an independent business, but we're an independent business that's part of a bigger jigsaw. And unless the strategy around that bigger jigsaw is kind of clear, it's very, very difficult for us to work out what we want to do. But for me, it's slightly precipitant, I suppose. And obviously we know the difficulty with it in terms of reduced fixture lists and all the rest of it. I can understand why the guys have changed their mind on it, but personally, I kind of would rather have seen, this issue considered as part of the bigger plan.
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? And the two other clubs, obviously Cardiff, it looks likely that Cardiff obviously are going to be part of the EDC in the future. Obviously, Neath have made another application as well, but. What of the other two clubs, Pontypridd and Merthyr? Because from the perspective of their fans, what does that mean for the relationship going forward is probably a concern that they'd have. And do you think that that relationship can maintain or even be strengthened? Because at the moment there are some that believe that relationship isn't as strong as it should be between the Cardiff-based region and the outer reaches of the region.
Yeah, I think one can always improve.
Yeah,
one can always do things better, and I think I think the regional structure is an interesting one, isn't it? We've all struggled with it. It's thrown a blanket over previously what have been quite tribal entities, and there will always be kind of tensions associated with that. But I think we take those responsibilities kind of seriously, and in a sense, you've been forced into a situation because of the qualifying criteria. There's been in a sense, team have been set against team because of the conditions that the union have put around this competition. So it's not something that we've obviously sought, but it's just something that we're responding to, just like the other clubs are responding to. So you had sort of you had a podcast the other week, didn't you, on the kind of pathway and all the kind of work that's going on there. So we can always, I think we're proud of the work that's happening there. We can always do it better. We can always have better links, etc., etc. But yeah, so some of this potential friction has been generated by the criteria, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I said you guys at board level probably a little bit more party to it than us, but one of the resounding themes I got from sort of like fans on social media, which isn't always the best place to get news, admittedly, but there seemed to be a lack of transparency from the WRU about what the exact criteria were. Actually, I thought the communication around the EDC was sort of it was very vague. It was almost the applications are open, and then next thing you hear out, these are the teams that have applied, and it didn't seem like, which again, communication improvement is something that's quite a common theme amongst a lot of businesses.
Yeah, I don't think it was that clear at the outset. Yes.
Yes, I think we'll part that one. But because you mentioned sort of a more joined up together strategy. So one of our listeners, Rich Williams, he's asked, do you know of any efforts going between Cardiff and the other clubs to try and get more fans in through the regional game? As that's been one of the WRU's big priorities. I'll leave my opinions to myself about how I think WRU have undermined it in this last. But
yeah, well, we know what the problems are, don't we? It's if you think about it, it's actually quite miraculous. I think any of the 4 teams are still here, because when you think about it, it's kind of like it's like if you're running a shop, but you're only allowed to open it like a certain number of days per week, and then on those days you can't actually kind of put your best goods on display. It's incredibly difficult operating a successful, club from a, spectator through the door point of view on that kind of basis. Going to sport is a habit, isn't it? And it's very difficult to develop that habit if it's not been ingrained in you through, previous arrangements. It's very difficult when you're down to, whatever it is, 9 club, league games a year. It's very difficult to sort of build that level of support. So I think we know what the problems are. I think as many people comment, the difficulty we've had historically is that, if there is a strategy in Welsh rugby, it's been about the national team, massively important. We have to, we're all seeking international success. But I think it's often been presented as, well, you could have club success, pro team club success, or you can have national success, but you can't have both. I think that's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And I think, Welsh rugby is crying out for, teams which are successful in whatever leagues they play in, which is another issue. And in Europe, and I think it would lift the whole kind of game if we had successful teams there again. So I think it's about how the balance has sort of swung too far one way, and I'm getting the feeling that the new regime at the union kind of recognises that, and it's just self-evident, isn't it? You can't have the tip of a triangle, which is really, really strong, when there's no foundation underneath it. And that's the position that we've kind of been in. So I think from our point of view, going back to your earlier question, we've won a handful of games, but, we've had 2 sellouts, 2 close on kind of sellouts. We know absolutely in the capital city that, we should be in a position where we're selling out every time we play, but we're not going to do that if we can't provide regular rugby, and if we're stripped of our best assets a lot of the time because they're being called on elsewhere. So I'm just really hopeful. I'm always optimistic, but I'm really hopeful that when the union produces its new strategy, it has significant contributions from the professional teams, and that is a strategy about growing the whole of the game in Wales, not just about the uppermost kind of tier. And then that comes back to things like, what does the EDC meant to do, etc., etc. What's happening below that? It has to be looking at every aspect of that pyramid, and we singularly failed to do that for a long, long, long time. So I think it's miraculous that we can actually get such crowds at the Elms Park as we've seen this year, and it's not because of the position of Welsh rugby. It's despite the position of Welsh rugby that we've been able to do that.
Is it just Welsh rugby? Is it also the league? Because some people would say, look at what happened against Harlequins, look at what happened against Bath. Therefore, Anglo-Welsh League solves maybe not all of, but some of the problems.
Yeah, I think it's not loved, is it? It's not a loved league, and yeah, it's inherently flawed if you never get away fans kind of pitching up for that. So I think to many people it's a no-brainer that I think an Anglo-Welsh league is always kind of challenging, but a British league maybe, it should be a no-brainer, although that will be challenging for some of our partners, because that would presumably have salary caps and all the rest of it. But it just seems blindingly obvious that once you go down that road, and if that's before you get into the environmental aspects of people flying 5,000 miles to play games and all the rest of it. So yeah, I think that sort of stuff feels like closer than it's ever been because of the you know, the problems that are happening in England. Whether it will happen or not, you know, who knows? Again, it's not a new thing, is it? But I think if change is going to happen in the leagues, it'll probably come about through you know, the pressures of EDC and so on. You know, so it's going to come out through financial pressures, I would think. But I'm not sure it's, you know, rugby is struggling generally. So I think something has to happen. And now would seem as good a time as any to think about that.
What?
That's a personal view. It's not a board view.
No, I completely understand that. You mentioned rugby is struggling. Is that purely down to COVID, or has COVID exacerbated what was already an existing issue for you?
There's so much choice, isn't there, for entertainment that, you know, these days, really, and people have you know, they're overwhelmed with you know, things that they could engage in, and I think it's not helpful that you don't have to leave the settee. You know, you can follow rugby just sat from the settee. You know, I think in some ways, you know, obviously TV money is hugely important, but there's a you know, risk of overexposure as well. So yeah, the fundamental problem we have is, you know, just talking locally, is lack of success.
Mm.
You know, that it's just blindingly obvious, you know, and professional sport is not purely about money, but it's significantly about money. So we're kind of trapped, I think, in a vicious circle at the moment. But we've seen this year what could be. So, you know, it's, you know, as a board, our job is to try and get us into a position whereby, you know, we're not all going, oh, fantastic, you know, we've got to sell out because it's Gwyn's or whatever. But, you know, we're seeing that kind of more regularly. That comes from winning, you know, and we've not been winning for a long time. So, yeah, sorry, I'm rambling again, but COVID was a massive hit, clearly, and you know, the consequences of COVID in terms of you know, the loans, etc., again, are well documented. We don't need to go over that, but you know, it's been a massive hit. But you know, overall, we're probably in a slightly better position than I thought we might have been.
It's good to hear. I think it depends how badly you thought it was going to be, but with Cardiff, it does seem this backs to the wall, David versus Goliath situation does seem to bring in the fans. Harley, I don't know if you've got some added questions, because I seem to have gone majorly off topic with the last two.
We haven't spoken biscuits or opera yet, so.
I was going to say, yeah. So I think it's time to move into some of the sort of less serious questions. But just first, I'm sure I know the answer, but I just want to ask it on behalf. So we had a couple of people on the Twitterers saying it. So this one, you know, sort of merged two from account Dragonfire, and then who helpfully is called Adam at PickWXM. And you know, it's more about development of training facilities, and you know, rumours that CAP might be developed post the 2028 Euros. I'm pretty sure at CF10, I remember at CF10 you said that board aren't even thinking about it yet until the Euros are out of the way. But if there are any updates, that'd be
not. I mean, the doing can't happen until the Euros are out of the way. But that doesn't mean it's not being thought about. It's being thought about, obviously, sort of a lot. So I mean, the work needs to be put in to make sure that once the Euros are out of the way, then the development, you know, can happen. So it's kind of like, you know, it's donkey's years overdue, and it's really complicated. It's complicated because of the different stakeholders. So obviously Cardiff Rugby is one of the stakeholders, but it's the tenant, not the landlord. So Cardiff Athletic Club is the landlord. Massive interdependency with the Welsh Rugby Union, not just in terms of the Glanmores Gap, but in terms of the facilities that the union needs to get all the TV trucks into the ground, to broadcast internationals. So that's part of that involves coming through our ground, and it's a really difficult site to develop. It's really quite, I think, a technical kind of challenge. But I get the feeling. I'm not involved in this sort of directly, but I kind of get the feeling that there's more optimism than there has been for a considerable amount of time about getting something done post 2028, and we have to anyway, because the ground's over 50 years old. We spend a huge amount of money trying to just maintain it and kind of keep it safe. That's money down the drain at the end of the day, and it still doesn't prevent us, struggling to maintain the capacity levels that we've kind of got. So it has to be done, and it just feels like hopefully everyone's pointing in the right direction now, and I think Phil and Neil are a catalyst for that. So I think it's known, but a couple of years ago we had quite a grand scheme for redeveloping the ground, which didn't happen, unfortunately. But Phil was part of the team that put those ideas together. So he's come to it with a lot of insight into the challenges of the site and so on. But as I said earlier on, I think we part of attracting players is not just what happens on the field, it's what's going on off the pitch and what the support is like and all the rest of it. So we need to get that right, and we have to improve. And we also have to have a ground that's capable of generating income, all the year round. So every sports stadium has the same problem. It's no good in just making money on the days you have a match. You've got to have other things there that help generate that income. So there's nothing positive, nothing firm to report at the moment, but people are working hard on it.
So one thing I said, because obviously training facilities in there recently, the club have pulled out the development plans with it to redevelop Pentwyn Leisure Centre.
Yeah.
I get all the logistical issues with that, so if you don't want to go into details of why that decision came about, that's fair enough. But
I think it's something. To be honest, Harley, I think it's in the press releases that we put out. I mean, it's taken a long time trying to get the leisure centre kind of sorted out. So it proved to be like really, really quite complicated. But also the squad actually quite like being, despite the fact it's falling down, they quite actually like being at the Ellis Park and having the central facilities there. So it was just those two things really, and what we're doing is putting in place temporary gym facilities, but they'll be better than what people have at the moment. It's a pretty shoddy area underneath the south stand, but with a view to once we get the redevelopment done, obviously that'll be the first opportunity to really get those right.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I think that's those. One thing, it's more of a request on my behalf. Southwest Terrace, can the bar there please have tea and coffee facilities, please? If they can get those put in, because the amount of cold cat nights when I'm driving and I can't rely on a beer jacket, it'd be appreciated to not have to go all the way to the sort of main bit by the clubhouse for a cup of tea.
Okay. She'll write myself a note.
Yeah, so I've said, what's the point in doing this? You can't make a few selfish requests.
No, absolutely.
Can the journalist section have heated seating as well? No, I'm joking. It's cold up there, to say the least, but that's part and parcel of the job, eh?
It's cold everywhere at CAP. I was at the under-20s last weekend. I forgot to pack a big coat, and I forgot how much you need a big coat.
I think I've never looked so green in my life as when I turned up to the Cardiff City Stadium with all the journalists. Every single one, bar one, was wearing a coat, and Muggins over here was sat there shivering in his jumper. So yeah, I think it's one of those things of stadiums are cold, and somehow I hadn't cottoned on to that in my brain.
Yeah. Oh, well, you live and learn.
So I think if we go into don't want to keep you all even, David, but you know, a few sort of more fun-ish questions. So I think for me, first of all, what's your sort of best memory at of Cardiff? You know, any games that stand out, any players?
Oh gosh, I have so many, I suppose. Oof. Yeah, there are loads of games, but like I love the Barbars game. I think God, was it in '76, the one we were 24-0 down and we won 29-28 or something. You know, fantastic sort of game. There was around the same time there was an absolutely epic game against Pontypool when they were really, really, you know, at their zenith, and it was a 7-all draw. It was a fantastic game. If I remember correctly, I might have got this wrong because you know all games merge into one at some point. But I think Pat Daniels scored a try that kind of got us the draw. But it was like a massive, massive, massive crowd, and it was like an international really. Being at Pontypool again when Gerald Davis scored those 4 tries to win the cup game, that was an absolutely magical occasion, and it was a game that I often sort of say it felt like we only won the ball about 5 times, you know, because again Pontypool were immense and Gerald Davis was just magical scoring those 4 tries. But if you look back at that game, you'll also see what what beasts the Lane brothers were, you know, absolutely phenomenal kind of players really. So that was magical. Seeing us beat Australia twice, that's great. Yeah, you know, more recently things like the EDF at Twickenham and Bill Barr, you know, kind of fantastic, really. But players, so many. Gerald Davis is always my favourite player, and my claim to fame is I took him out once in the Cardiff bar. It was only because we both weren't looking at the direction we were going in, but I kind of collided with Gerald Davis, and that's my kind of claim to fame. Took him out. Yeah, players, you know, my era was, I suppose, Terry Holmes, Gareth Davis, you know, fabulous. Players like Dan Barr, you know, phenomenal. There's so many, really, so many. But yeah, it's kind of in the blood, really. Yeah, but that will kind of, how's that?
That's great. Harley, well, I don't think I've ever asked you, who's your favourite Cardiff player?
I think my favourite, it's still very recent, but I think for me, Josh Navidi is basically it's been. I'll be honest, there's a theme with the sort of players I love. So Martin Williams, Warburton, Josh Navidi. You know, I like Masters of the Dark Arts and stuff. You know, Martin Williams to me, I say is better than Richie McCaw because everyone knew Richie McCaw cheated. Everyone forgets about Martin Williams doing it. It says he was better at that. He was better at it than McCaw was.
Yeah.
What about you, Carwyn? Your favourite Cardiff moment or player?
EDF, weirdly. I don't know why. That sticks out. I think there's the performance and the tries that were scored. They were just such great tries. Favorite player, Gethin stands out to me. To be honest, I don't think I don't think there'd been a prop like him for a long time. Really, that mobile, that quick, that brilliant around the park, brilliant over the ball, could scrummage as well. Yeah, it was just that was what it was for me with Gethin.
Yeah, and it's great. It's great to have him involved now, you know. And I think whereas kind of you know, he was meant to be doing whatever it was, like 2 days a week. I think he was, you know, his inputs being like obviously way bigger than that. And then you know we know for next year that's going to be more substantial again. But yeah, I think you know adding to what Matt's doing, having people like Gethin there, you know, is phenomenal, really.
Mm. Can I ask, for people watching on Zoom, they may get this reference because there's a Tristan and Isolde poster behind you, and I'm a big fan of opera, and we had a little chat before we started. This may be even harder than the Cardiff player and team question, but favorite opera, and one that, or maybe one that people should go and see.
It would either be Tristan or it would be Parsifal. It would be definitely Wagner. So yeah, probably Parsifal. I love Parsifal.
See, my advice would be go for start with the lighter opera, so like Magic
Oh,
Flute or
no.
Barbara Seville.
God, no way, no. If you go and see those first, you never go again. My dear wife is not an opera fan. But she had the pleasure of attending the Bayreuth Festival with me last year, I think it was, when there was the most awful production of The Ring one could imagine, and so she suffered for that. But yeah, you don't go and see Wagner the first off. No, I first went to opera because years and years ago, when the Savoy Gardens Pavilion was still standing, every year Welsh National Opera did a free concert there. It's a way of sort of selling subscriptions. So for me, there was the leading tenor at the time was a guy called Kenneth Collins, and he sang Nessun Dorma before Nessun Dorma became really famous through the football and all the rest of it. And people just went nuts. And he hadn't had anything else prepared for an encore, so he sang it again. I thought, this is quite good. So that's when I got into it. But I've moved on to other things now.
See, my first opera story is I went to see Magic Flute. My mum's big into her music and big into her music. Great English, Carwyn. Is very fond of music and performing operas, etc. And took me at a very young age to go and see Magic Flute. And I think about 10 minutes before the end, I was busting to go to the loo. And about 5 minutes of it, so I insisted to my mum that we had to buy another ticket to go again, so that I could see the ending. So sorry to mum for that, for spending such money on 2 tickets, but I think it was worthwhile.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned Death in Venice as well, which Welsh National Opera have just done. If you get a chance to go and see it, go and see it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. There's another.
For those on the audio stream, I'm just smiling like an idiot because I've heard of the Magic Flutes, Nissan Door, and that's about it. I'm very much quite basic in my music tastes.
David, I could carry it on and just start another pod about opera and great operas around in Wales. But no, go on, Ali. I know you've got your obligatory question as well that you want to ask.
Oh yeah, let's get it out of the way for this. So this one's for Liam. Everything Cardiff Rugby. He'd like to know although you did answer it, you did very kindly answer it for him on X. But so what is your favourite biscuit?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I can confirm it is a chocolate hobnob.
Best so far. We've had digestives mainly, isn't it?
Yeah, most people keep very saying. I mean, for me, I can't go wrong with the malted milk. It just brings back it, but it's a nostalgia. It's purely nostalgia. It just reminds me of being in nursery and you'd have your milk and biscuits, and it was.
But do you know that Waitrose do chocolate malted milk?
Yeah,
they're exceptional. That's an exceptional biscuit, gentlemen. It really is.
I feel people are too boring. Viennese foxes. What are they called? The sort of
the Viennese fingers things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know the one you're about. They're all right.
Pushing it out. Your custard creams are great as well, and your bourbons, but a bit more experimental.
Lidl's custard creams have something in them that make them addictive because they are. I cannot. I don't particularly enjoy them any more than any other biscuit, but I can't stop. Once I have a packet of them, I will just go through them in one sitting. It's not healthy. Anyway, I feel like it's time to break out one of the more controversial questions on the pod. North or South Terrace?
Oof. South Stand, I'm afraid.
We're in the seats. Oof.
Yeah. Yeah, I've moved about. When I first started going, we were first game I ever went to was in the North Stand, but then actually throughout all my school years, it was South Terrace, so next to the players' entrance. Then kind of as one got a bit older, one needed to sit down a bit. But yeah, so I suppose I would have to, if pushed, I would have to say South Terrace.
Yeah, I've done both, and I'm still not sure. Obviously, I'm stand now because of work commitments primarily is when I tend to go. But yeah, North. I did have a really good time in the North Stand as well. I know Harley's got a bit of a stronger view than I have, but I'm probably with you, David, where I've had good times at all. But yeah, South Stand is where I tend to be now.
Yeah, well, we had a long period sort of sitting in the North Stand. We ended up having to move because we kept getting into trouble. Because obviously that's where visiting fans used to go in the old days, and we used to get into sort of terrible scraps. So we had to move for safety reasons.
I'm very much Southwest Terrace, as close to the crazy corner with all the former Cardiff Blues brothers banging away on the drum, doing all the chants. It's quite nice. It was almost for quite a while. It was a guaranteed way to have a chat, be able to have a chat with Lilo and Halaholo after a game because they'd leap over the hoardings and come and say hello. Unless there's anything else you want to ask, Carwyn?
No, I think I've asked everything I can ask, to be fair to David. Although there's plenty more, I'm sure we'll have in the future. The probably the main thing I wished for David is hopefully the next term, if he takes it up, is a lot smoother than the previous three, because it has been so difficult.
Yeah, that's the temptation, isn't it? I think that's the lure of maybe staying on to do it. It's the hope that it gets happier. I mean, this is kind of repeated in the board kind of quite often, but I'll repeat it here. When Gareth Edwards was asked to join the board by Peter Thomas, he said, "Oh, come on, Gareth, it'll be kind of great fun." And about sort of 3 years into being on the board, Gareth said to Peter, "When's the fun going to start?" So it's a bit like that.
I suppose one last thing is, obviously we're recording this in the middle of the Six Nations. I'm not. I mean, you feel free to give your opinion on how you think Wales have done this, but I just want to know how great is it? We had 4 new blue and black debutants put on the red for Wales. So Evan, most recently Evan Lloyd, and then you've had the likes of Alex Mann and Cam Winnett, who've been playing very well.
It's been fantastic, isn't it? I think, and again, that's a tribute to all the things that we've spoken about that are happening at the club, really. But yeah, I find it quite interesting. There was a comment on X the other day, and it was about it was in the debate about Gatland, should he go or should he stay? And somebody sort of said, well, give credit to the man, he's uncovered all this new talent. I thought, oh, I think we might have had a hand in that somehow.
Speaking on new talent, I just thought I'd chime in with wishing the Wales under-20s players good luck on the weekend, because there are a number of young Cardiff players, a couple of new ones having their opportunity. Matty Young at fullback, Elijah Evans at 13, Harry Wild is back at 10, Evan Wood, Cardiff Met, and we'll take ownership of that as well at hooker. Lucas Delarue is continuing his position at 6, but also on the bench, Gethin Cannon and Cody Stone as well on the bench. So wishing them all the best of luck, especially the new cap players, or uncapped players as it is currently on the weekend. Yep,
absolutely.
Oh, and Ponty are currently playing, but I don't know what the score is. So I was all the best to them tonight, playing on in the Welsh Premiership. So obviously they're still hopeful of getting to that top 4, but that seems a tough order now. I think there's a fair summation for them.
Yeah, I'm sure our good friend Yeston will have a decent match report out for us to catch up on that one. So unless there's anything you'd like to ask us, David?
No, I'm good. Thanks, boys. It's been really enjoyable, and let's do it again sometime, as I say.
That sounds like a promise to come back on to me. So I think we'll hold you that. So all that's left for me to say is thank you very much for coming on, David.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you to my co-host, as ever, Carwyn.
Yeah,
and thank you all for listening. Ta-ra.